Tessa Hart pulled a jagged, silver spear out of a dying animal's chest in the middle of a thunderstorm. That was her first mistake. Her second mistake was bringing him into her home. She thought she was just saving a wolf. She thought she was doing the humane thing. She didn't know that the creature bleeding out on her living room rug was Silas Vane, the king of the West Coast Alphas. She didn't know that by saving his life. She was painting a target on her own back. For anyone living near Blackwood Ridge, the warning was clear. Lock your doors. Because what Tessa saw that night wasn't nature. It was war. If one were to look up Tessa Hart, they wouldn't find much, and that was by design. She had moved to a cabin 3 miles outside of Oak Haven, Oregon, to get away from people. After her fiancé passed away in a car accident that felt too orchestrated to be real, she needed silence. She needed trees. She didn't need drama. And she certainly didn't need magic. It was a Tuesday in November the 14th, specifically, and the rain wasn't just falling. It was being driven sideways by a wind that screamed like a banshee. Tessa was in the kitchen making tea when she heard a sound that cut through the thunder. It wasn't a howl. It was a wet, gurgling thud against her back porch steps. She grabbed a flashlight and her dad's old hunting rifle. She wasn't a violent person, but living alone in the Pacific Northwest had taught her that bears and cougars didn't care about pacifism. She cracked the door open. The beam of the flashlight hit wet fur first. It was black, pitch black, absorbing the light rather than reflecting it. It was a wolf. But to call it a wolf felt like an insult to the scale of the thing. It was the size of a black bear, sprawled across the wooden planks, heaving. But the thing that made Tessa drop the rifle wasn't the size. It was the weapon. Protruding from the animal's ribcage was a spear. It wasn't primitive. It was modern, sleek, and made of a metal that looked like liquid mercury frozen in time. The shaft was engraved with unreadable symbols, glowing faintly with a dull, violet hue. "Oh my God," she whispered. The wolf's head snapped up. Its eyes were gold, not animal yellow molten, intelligent gold. It looked at her, and in that moment, Tessa didn't see animal panic. She saw human desperation. He tried to rise and collapsed, a fresh wave of dark blood washing over the decking. Her brain screamed at her to slam the door. "This is a monster," her survival instinct yelled. "This isn't normal." But Tessa was a nurse, or she had been, before she quit. The nurse in her saw the arterial spray and moved before her brain could stop her. She dropped to her knees in the rain. "Hey, hey, stay down!" she shouted over the wind. The wolf snarled, a low, tectonic rumble that vibrated through the deck boards into her knees. He snapped his jaws teeth the size of steak knives, inches from her face. "I'm trying to help you, you idiot!" she screamed back, adrenaline overriding fear. "You're dying!" The wolf paused. He looked at the rifle she had dropped, then back at her, slowly, deliberately. He laid his head back down. He was letting her in. Tessa examined the wound. The spear had gone deep, just missing the shoulder blade, likely puncturing a lung given the frothy blood. If she pulled it out, he might bleed out instantly. If she left it in, the infection or the metal itself, which seemed to be burning his flesh, would kill him. "This is going to hurt," she told him, unsure why she was talking to him like a person. She gripped the shaft of the spear. It was ice cold, painfully so. 1, 2, 3. She yanked. It required all her strength. The suction of the wound fought her, but with a sickening squelch, the metal slid free. The wolf let out a sound she would never forget. A human scream of agony wrapped in a canine growl. He thrashed, his claws gouging deep grooves into the wood, clipping her arm. Tessa fell back, clutching the bloody spear. The wolf shuddered once, twice, and then went still. She scrambled forward, pressing her hands directly into the gaping wound, trying to stem the flow. "Don't you die on me!" she sobbed, the rain mixing with the hot blood on her hands. "Don't you dare die!" She dragged him inside. Dragging 400 pounds of dead weight required a tarp and sheer panic, but she managed to get him onto the rug in front of the fireplace. She packed the wound with gauze, stitched the jagged edges of skin as best she could with her emergency kit, and collapsed. She sat there for hours, watching his chest rise and fall, holding that strange, alien spear in her lap. Around 3 a.m., the bleeding stopped. Around 4 a.m., steam started rising from his body. Tessa thought the house was on fire. She jumped up, but the smoke wasn't coming from the logs. It was coming from the wolf. His bones were cracking, snapping, and rearranging themselves with the sound of gunshots. The fur began to recede, soaking back into the skin. She backed away until she hit the kitchen island, grabbing a knife from the counter. The massive beast shrank. The paws elongated into hands, the snout flattened. 5 minutes later, there was no wolf, lying naked, unconscious, and covered in blood on her living room rug was a man. And not just any man. He looked like a statue carved out of granite, scars crossing a torso that rose and fell with steady breaths. Tessa walked over, the knife trembling in her hand. She kicked his foot gently. His eyes snapped open, those same molten gold eyes. He sat up, looking at the bandage on his chest, then at her, then at the knife in her hand. He didn't scream. He didn't ask where he was. He looked at her with a terrifying intensity and spoke his first words. His voice was gravel and velvet. "You should have let me die. Little bird. Now, they're going to come for you too." Tessa pointed the steak knife at his throat. "Who are they?" she demanded. Her voice was shaking, but she held her ground. "And what the hell are you?" The man groaned, pressing a hand to his temple. He tried to stand, but his legs gave out, and he slumped back against the stone hearth of the fireplace. The firelight danced over him, highlighting a tattoo on his left pectoral, a geometric design of a wolf eating the sun. "I need water," he rasped, ignoring her question. "Answer me first." He looked up, and the gold in his eyes faded slightly to a deep amber. "I am a complication you cannot afford. Now, water. Please." The please threw her off. It wasn't begging. It was a command wrapped in politeness. She hesitated, then grabbed a glass, filled it from the tap, and set it on the floor halfway between them before retreating immediately. He drank it in one gulp. "My name is Silas," he said, wiping his mouth. "And you have something that belongs to me." He nodded toward the coffee table where she had placed the silver spear. "You're a werewolf," she said. It sounded ridiculous saying it out loud in her cozy log cabin, with her grandma's quilt draped over the sofa. Silas let out a dark, dry chuckle. "If only it were that simple. I am an alpha, and that," he pointed to the spear, "is pure quick silver mixed with wolfsbane ash. It's designed to kill things that cannot be killed." "Someone tried to murder you." "Someone is murdering me," he corrected. "A coup. I was ambushed at the border of the territory." He looked at her. Really looked at her, analyzing her like a threat assessment. "You removed it. Why, I'm a nurse. I fix things. You touched the silver. It didn't burn you. Tessa looked at her hands. They were stained with blood, but unburned. No. Why should it? Silas narrowed his eyes. Interesting. He forced himself up. This time he managed to stand. He was tall, easily 6'4", and he loomed over the room. He looked around, spotting a throw blanket on the sofa. He wrapped it around his waist with a dignity that shouldn't have been possible for a man who was stark naked moments ago. I need to leave, he said. You're in no condition to walk, she argued, her medical instincts overriding her fear. You lost liters of blood. You need fluids. Rest. I heal fast. Tess, he said. He knew her name. He must have seen the mail on the counter. But if I stay here, the scent of my blood will draw them. They are tracking the spear. He walked to the coffee table and picked up the weapon. He grimaced as his skin touched it, smoke rising from his palm. But he didn't drop it. Who? She asked, stepping closer. Who's hunting you? Gideon. He spat the name like a curse. My second in command. If he finds you, he will kill you just to tie up a loose end. You need to forget you saw me. Burn the rug. Bleach the deck. If anyone asks, you heard a bear. He moved to the back door. The storm was still raging outside. Wait, she called out. He paused, hand on the doorknob. You're bleeding through the bandage, she said softly. Silas looked down at his chest, then back at her. For a second, the hardness in his face softened. He looked lonely. I owe you a life debt, Tessa Hart, he said solemnly. I pray I never have to repay it, because if I do, it means your life is in danger. He opened the door and vanished into the rain. Tessa didn't sleep that night. She spent the next 6 hours scrubbing the deck with bleach until her nose burned. She rolled up the expensive Persian rug and burned it in the backyard fire pit. Watching the flames consume the evidence, she told herself it was a hallucination, a gas leak, a vivid dream. 2 days passed. The rain stopped. The woods were silent. She started to believe she had imagined it. Then came Friday. She needed groceries. Tessa drove her beat-up Subaru into Oakhaven. It was a small town, one main street, a diner, a hardware store, and a lot of gossip. As she was loading bags of dog food for her non-existent dog, a cover for why she lived so isolated, she felt a prickle on the back of her neck. She turned around. Across the street, parked in front of the only bank in town, was a sleek, matte black Range Rover. Leaning against it was a man in a tailored charcoal suit. He was wearing sunglasses, but she didn't need to see his eyes. She knew the jawline. She knew the way he held himself, like a coiled spring. It was Silas. He wasn't covered in blood or mud. He looked like he owned the town. And he was watching her. Tessa froze, clutching the dog food. He pushed off the car and began to walk across the street toward her. People parted for him like the Red Sea. He didn't look like a monster now. He looked like a billionaire. He stopped 3 feet from her. He smelled like expensive cologne and ozone. I told you to forget me, he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. It's hard to forget a naked man in my living room, she snapped, her defense mechanism kicking in. The corner of his lip twitched. A smile. Get in the car. Tessa. Excuse me. Get in the car. He scanned the rooftops of the buildings around them. You didn't bleach the deck well enough. They found your scent. Her stomach dropped. Who? Gideon's trackers. They are 3 miles from your cabin. If you go home now, You're dead." She looked at her Subaru, then at him. "You saved the king," Silas whispered, leaning in, his lips brushing her ear. "Now let the king save you." Tessa dropped the dog food. She got in the Range Rover. As they sped out of town, she looked in the side mirror. A grey van was pulling out of the alleyway, following them. "Hold on," Silas said. Shifting gears, his hand transformed just for a second, claws erupting from his manicured fingers to grip the leather steering wheel. "We're going to hunt!" The speedometer on the Range Rover hit 120 miles per hour, but inside the cabin, it felt terrifyingly smooth. The world outside was a blur of wet pine and grey asphalt. "Silas, slow down!" Tessa gripped the handle above the door until her knuckles turned white. "You're going to kill us before they do. Look behind us. Tessa," Silas said calmly. His voice was void of panic, which somehow made her more terrified. She turned in her seat. The grey van was gone. "They're gone," she said, letting out a breath. "We lost them." "Look lower." She squinted through the rain-streaked rear window. Her heart hammered against her ribs. There was no van, but there were shapes moving on the asphalt. 4 of them. Massive, grey blurs galloping on all fours, keeping pace with a car doing double the speed limit. "Wolves," she breathed. "They're chasing a car. They are enforcers, genetically enhanced. They don't tire, and they don't stop," Silas said. He checked the side mirror. "Hold the wheel." "What?" "Grab the wheel." "Tessa, now." She lunged across the center console, grabbing the leather steering wheel as Silas released it. He didn't just let go. He opened his door. At 120 miles per hour. "Keep it straight," he roared over the wind noise. He leaned out of the moving car, hanging by one hand on the doorframe. Tessa screamed, fighting the torque of the vehicle as it hit a patch of standing water. In the side mirror, she saw one of the grey wolves launch itself into the air, aiming for the open door, jaws ready to rip Silas out of the driver's seat. Silas didn't flinch. As the wolf lunged, Silas punched it. It sounded ridiculous to say a man punched a wolf in midair, but that's what happened. A sickening crack echoed over the wind, and the massive beast was sent spiraling off the road, crashing into the guardrail in a heap of fur and broken bones. Silas swung himself back inside and slammed the door. He took the wheel from her shaking hands. "One down," he muttered. "You're insane," she whispered. "You are actually insane." "I am efficient," he corrected. He banked the car hard onto a hidden exit ramp, a gravel logging road that didn't look like it appeared on any GPS. The sudden turn caused the remaining 3 wolves to overshoot, their claws sparking against the highway asphalt as they tried to stop. But Silas and Tessa were already gone, disappearing into the dense tree line. They drove in silence for an hour, climbing higher into the mountains. The gravel turned to a paved private driveway, winding up a cliff face. Finally, the trees broke, revealing a structure that didn't belong in the wilderness. It was a fortress of glass and steel, cantilevered over the edge of a canyon. It looked like something a Bond villain would own. "Welcome to the Eyrie," Silas said, as the massive iron gates groaned open automatically. He pulled into a garage filled with cars that cost more than Tessa's entire life's earnings. He killed the engine. The silence that followed was heavy. Tessa didn't move. She just stared at the dashboard. "Tessa," Silas said softly. "I'm a nurse," she said, her voice sounding hollow. "I pay my taxes. I watch cooking shows. I don't get chased by super wolves. I don't watch men punch animals on the highway. I want to go home." Silas sighed. He turned in his seat, his presence filling the small space. You can't go home. Gideon has already burned your cabin. She whipped her head around. He what? Standard protocol. If a human witnesses a shift, we scrub the site. If the human helps a target, we scrub the human. Gideon thinks you're dead inside that house. If you go back, or if you call anyone, you prove him wrong. And then he will come for you properly. Tears pricked her eyes. Everything she owned, her grandmother's quilt, her photos, gone. Why? She choked out. Why is this happening? Because, Silas said, reaching out. He hesitated, then tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers were hot, scorching against her cold skin. Because I am the Alpha King of the Western Territories, and Gideon is my cousin who believes that wolves should stop hiding and start ruling. He wants to expose our kind to the world, start a war with humanity. I was the only thing stopping him. He leaned closer, his golden eyes locking onto hers. I was dying. Tessa, the coup was successful. I was dead on your porch. But then you touched the silver spear. So, silver burns us. It kills us. It nullifies our healing. No wolf can touch that spear without losing a hand, and no normal human can pull it out without the magical warding stopping them. He paused, letting the weight of his next words settle. You handled the God-killer spear like it was a toy. That isn't possible. You aren't just a nurse. Tessa Hart. You are something else. And until I figure out what you are, and until I take back my throne, you are under my protection. He opened his door. Now come inside. I need to stitch my wounds. And I believe you mentioned you were a professional. She followed him into the house. It was cold, modern, and beautiful. But it felt like a prison. They went to the master bathroom. He sat on the edge of the marble tub and took off his shirt. The wound on his chest, the one she had stitched, was angry and red, black veins spider-webbing out from the center. It's poisoned, she said, switching into nurse mode because it was easier than dealing with her emotions. She found a first aid kit under the sink, though it was more like a surgical field kit. The infection is spreading. It's necrotic magic. Silas grunted as she probed the wound. It will fade. My wolf is fighting it. You need antibiotics, IV fluids. I need a steak, rare, and whiskey. Tessa cleaned the wound, her hands shaking slightly. Being this close to him was distracting. He smelled like rain and musk and raw power. His skin was hard as rock, radiating heat. Every time she grazed him, a static shock zipped through her fingers. Do you feel that? She asked, dabbing antiseptic on a jagged cut near his ribs. The pain, the electricity. Silas went still. He looked down at her, his face inches from hers, his pupils dilated, swallowing the gold irises. I feel it, he whispered. His voice dropped an octave, vibrating in her chest. It's the bond. The what? Wolves. We don't date. Tessa, we recognize. My wolf recognizes you. She pulled back, capping the antiseptic bottle. Okay, let's not do that. Let's not add destined werewolf romance to the list of things ruining my life today. Silas let out a rough laugh. Fair enough, but you should know. The reason I brought you here isn't just to protect you. Why else? Because tomorrow night is the Solstice Gala at Vane Tower in Seattle. It's where the council meets. It's where Gideon plans to announce my death and claim the crown. Okay. I need to walk into that ballroom, alive and well, to challenge him. Good luck with that. I can't go alone, Silas said, standing up. He towered over her. Gideon will have guards. He will have political allies. If I walk in alone, they will shoot me before I reach the stage. I need a distraction. I need a witness. I need someone who can carry the smell of the alpha without being a wolf. He handed her a black credit card. You're coming with me, Tessa, and you're going to be my queen for the night. The next 24 hours were a blur of panic and preparation. Silas had people not wolves, but humans who worked for him deliver boxes to the safe house, dresses, shoes, jewelry. Tessa stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror in the guest bedroom. The dress Silas had chosen was aggressive. It was emerald green silk, backless, with a slit that went up to her hip. It hugged every curve, leaving nothing to the imagination. She felt like an imposter. She was a girl who wore scrubs and oversized sweaters. This woman in the mirror looked dangerous. Are you ready? Silas's voice came from the hallway. She opened the door. Silas was wearing a tuxedo. If she thought he looked good in a suit. This was unfair. The cut was impeccable, tailored to hide the bulk of his muscles while accentuating his broad shoulders. He had shaved the stubble, leaving a sharp, clean jawline. He stopped when he saw her. He didn't say anything. He just stared. The air in the hallway suddenly felt very thin. Too much? She asked, fidgeting with the silk. No, he rasped. He walked over to her, stopping just short of touching her. He inhaled deeply, as if memorizing her scent. You look lethal. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a necklace. It was a simple silver chain with a pendant, a rough, uncut black diamond. Wear this, he said. It has a tracker, and it masks your human scent. To them, you will smell like ozone and pack. He fastened it around her neck. His fingers lingered on her nape, sending shivers down her spine. Tessa, he said, his mouth close to her ear. Tonight will be dangerous. Gideon will try to provoke you. He will try to separate us. Do not let him. I'm terrified. Silas. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. Just hold my arm. Look bored, and if anyone touches you, break their finger. You have my permission. We took the helicopter. They landed on the roof of the Vane Tower in downtown Seattle. The wind whipped Tessa's hair as they walked toward the elevator. Her heart was beating so hard she thought she might pass out. Showtime, Silas said, as the elevator doors opened. The ballroom was opulent. Crystal chandeliers, a live orchestra, hundreds of people in designer wear. But the vibe was wrong. It was predatory. The laughter was too sharp. The smiles didn't reach the eyes. As they stepped out, the room went silent. The music stopped. The conversations died. Every head turned. Silas Vane, the dead king, walked into the center of the room with a hand on the small of Tessa's back. He radiated dominance. It rolled off him in waves, so potent that she saw people physically flinch and step back. Keep walking, he whispered to her. Chin up. They cut through the crowd like a knife. She saw shock on their faces. Fear. At the far end of the room, standing on a raised dais with a champagne glass in hand, was a man who looked like a twisted mirror image of Silas. Same height, same dark hair, but his face was crueler, sharper. Gideon! He froze when he saw them. The glass in his hand shattered, champagne dripping onto his expensive shoes. Silas stopped 10 feet from the dais. Cousin! Silas boomed, his voice filling the cavernous room without a microphone. I hear you've been planning my funeral. I apologize for the inconvenience, but I seem to be very much alive." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Gideon recovered quickly. He wiped his hand on a napkin, a snakeskin smile spreading across his face. "Silas, we were told you fell to a rogue attack. We are overjoyed to see you. I bet you are," Silas said dryly. Gideon's eyes shifted to Tessa. He stepped down from the dais, prowling toward them. Up close, his eyes weren't gold, they were a sickly, pale yellow. "And who is this?" Gideon asked, stepping into Tessa's personal space. "You brought a pet to the council." "Silas." "That's against protocol." "She is not a pet," Silas growled, his grip on her waist tightening. "She is my guest, and you will address her with respect." Gideon laughed. It was a cold sound. "My apologies." He extended a hand to her. "Gideon Vane, and you are—" Tessa looked at his hand. She remembered Silas's advice. Break their finger. She didn't take his hand. She looked him dead in the eye and channeled every ounce of rage she felt about her burning cabin. "Unimpressed," she said. The crowd gasped. Silas's chest rumbled. He was suppressing a laugh. Gideon's smile faltered, and he lowered his hand. "Charming." Suddenly, the lights in the ballroom flickered. The heavy double doors at the entrance slammed shut and locked with a resounding thud. "Well," Gideon said, taking a step back, "since the family is all here. Silas, perhaps we should skip the pleasantries." He snapped his fingers. From the shadows of the room, 20 waiters dropped their trays. They weren't waiters. They reached under their jackets and pulled out weapons. Not guns. Spears. The same silver, glowing spears that had been in the wolf on her porch. "It was a trap," she whispered, clutching Silas's arm. "It's always a trap," Silas said, loosening his tie with one hand. "Tessa, get behind the bar. Stay down. What are you going to do?" Silas's eyes flashed gold. He began to unbutton his cufflinks. "I'm going to remind them why I am the king." "Kill him!" Gideon screamed. The room erupted into chaos. The waiters charged. Silas didn't shift. He didn't have time. He moved with human speed, but superhuman strength. He grabbed the first attacker by the throat and threw him into the second. Tessa scrambled toward the marble bar, sliding over the top just as a spear embedded itself in the wood where her head had been. She crouched behind the bar, breathing hard, listening to the sounds of breaking bones and shattering glass. She peeked over the edge. Silas was fighting like a demon. He was outnumbered 20-1. But he was winning. He moved like water, dodging strikes, using their own momentum against them, but then she saw it. Gideon wasn't fighting. He was standing by the dais, watching, and he was holding something a remote detonator. Tessa's eyes widened. She looked around the room. On the structural pillars, barely visible near the ceiling, were small, blinking red lights. C4. He was going to bring the whole building down. He didn't care about the council. He didn't care about the innocent people. He was going to bury Silas, even if it meant burying himself. She had to warn him. She stood up. "Silas, the pillars." "There are bombs." Silas turned to look at her, distracted for a fraction of a second. That was all Gideon needed. One of the attackers lunged, driving a silver dagger into Silas's thigh. Silas roared, dropping to one knee. "Grab the girl," Gideon shouted. 2 men grabbed Tessa before she could duck. They dragged her out from behind the bar. She kicked and screamed, but they were too strong. They hauled her toward Gideon. Gideon grabbed her hair, yanking her head back. He pressed the cold barrel of a gun to her temple. "Enough," Gideon screamed. Silas froze. He was bleeding from 3 different wounds, panting heavily, surrounded by unconscious bodies. He looked at Tessa, his eyes wide with fear for the first time. "Let her go." "Gideon," Silas said, his voice shaking. "The fight is between us. The fight is over. Cousin," Gideon sneered. He looked at Tessa, sniffing the air. "You know, she smells strange. Not like a human, not like a wolf." He leaned in, whispering into her ear. "Ask him, darling. Ask the king why he saved you. Ask him about the prophecy of the silver blood." "Shut up, Gideon," Silas roared, taking a step forward. Gideon cocked the hammer of the gun. "Stay back, or I paint the walls with her brains." He looked at Tessa with mock pity. "He didn't pick you by accident, sweetheart. He's been watching you for years, because your blood is the only thing that can cure the madness that kills all alphas eventually. You aren't his girlfriend. You're his medicine cabinet." Tessa looked at Silas. She wanted him to deny it. She wanted him to scream that it was a lie. But Silas just looked down, his jaw clenched. He didn't deny it. Her heart shattered. "Now," Gideon said, dragging her backward toward a private exit door. "I think I'll take the cure for myself." Gideon didn't take her to a dungeon. He took her to the sky. He dragged Tessa through the emergency exit of the tower, out onto the helipad where his own chopper was waiting, a sleek, military-grade bird with the rotors already spinning. The wind up there was ferocious, whipping her dress around her legs, stinging her eyes. But the cold outside was nothing compared to the cold spreading through her chest. "He's been watching you for years. You aren't his girlfriend. You're his medicine cabinet." The words looped in her mind like a broken record. Every kindness Silas had shown her, every protective gesture, the way he looked at her in the car. Was it all just a farmer checking on his prize livestock? Was she just a walking blood bank to him? Gideon shoved her into the back of the helicopter. He climbed in opposite her, keeping the gun leveled at her chest. The pilot, a silent woman with a scar running down her cheek, lifted them off the roof immediately. As they banked away from the Vane Tower, Tessa looked down. She saw a figure smash through the glass doors onto the helipad. It was Silas. He was limping, blood soaking his tuxedo trousers. But he was running. He reached the edge of the roof just as they pulled away. He didn't stop. He looked up at the helicopter, threw his head back, and let out a roar that she couldn't hear over the engine. But she felt it. It rattled the windows of the chopper. "Look at him!" Gideon shouted over the headset he had forced onto her head. "Desperate! A king without a crown, a beast without his cure." Tessa glared at Gideon. "If I'm so valuable," she said into the mic, her voice trembling with rage, "why did you try to blow me up 5 minutes ago?" Gideon laughed. He opened a mini-fridge and pulled out a bottle of water, offering her none. "I didn't know it was you. Tessa." We knew Silas had found the silver blood, the descendant of the ancient hunters, but we didn't know who she was. We thought he hid you in a vault. When I smelled you, when I realized he was parading the cure right under my nose, well, plans changed. "So what now?" she asked. "You kill him and keep me in a cage?" "Basically." Gideon shrugged. "Though cage is such a harsh word, you'll live in luxury. You'll just have to donate a pint a week. It extends our lifespan, you see. Stops the feral degeneration. With you, I can rule for centuries." He leaned forward, his face twisting into a sneer. "Did he tell you how he found you? Did he tell you about the car accident?" Her blood ran cold. "What?" "Your fiancé," Gideon said smoothly. "The accident 3 years ago on Route 9. Did Silas mention that his pack was hunting a rogue in that area that night? Did he mention that the rogue caused the crash that killed your lover? The air left her lungs. Silas was there. Tessa. He pulled you out of the wreckage. He smelled your blood then. He could have saved your fiancé. He had the strength to rip that door off. But he didn't. Gideon smiled, a predator sensing weakness. He let the human die, so he could keep the prize for himself. He's been grooming you, isolating you in that cabin, waiting for the right time to claim you. Tessa felt like she was going to throw up. The isolation, the grief, the reason she moved to the woods. It was all him. Suddenly, the helicopter lurched violently to the left. Turbulence. The pilot screamed. "It's not turbulence!" Gideon yelled, looking out the window. Something had hit the tail rotor. Tessa looked out. They were flying over the dense forest of the Olympic Peninsula now, miles from the city. Below them, the tree line was a blur of black, but climbing the landing skids of the helicopter was a shape. It wasn't a wolf. It was a man. Silas. He must have jumped. He must have followed the scent and launched himself from the highest tree or a cliff. It was impossible physics. But there he was, hanging on to the metal skid with one hand, his tuxedo shredded, his eyes glowing with a violet, radioactive fury. "Shake him off!" Gideon screamed at the pilot. The helicopter dipped and spun. Her stomach slammed into her throat. Gideon raised his gun, aiming through the glass at Silas. He fired. Bang, bang. The glass shattered. A bullet hit Silas in the shoulder. He didn't even flinch. He punched through the plexiglass window, his hand wrapping around the pilot's throat. "Land!" Silas roared. The pilot passed out from the pressure. The helicopter entered a nose dive. "Brace yourself," Tessa screamed, curling into a ball as the treetops rushed up to meet them. The world turned into a chaotic spin of metal, snapping branches and screaming engines. They hit the canopy, then the ground. Everything went black. Tessa woke up to the smell of jet fuel and wet earth. She was hanging upside down, held in by her seatbelt. The helicopter was a crumpled tin can, resting on its side in a muddy clearing. Rain was pouring in through the shattered windshield. "Tessa!" The voice was weak. She looked over. Gideon was gone. His seatbelt was cut. She fumbled with her buckle, releasing it. She fell into the mud with a splash. Pain shot through her left arm, probably broken, but she could move. She crawled out of the wreckage. The clearing was illuminated by the moonlight breaking through the storm clouds. 20 yards away, 2 monsters were fighting. Silas had shifted. He was the massive black wolf again, but he was moving sluggishly. He was bleeding from the gunshot wounds, from the crash, and from the silver poisoning that was still in his system. Gideon had shifted too. He was a grey wolf, slightly smaller than Silas, but fresh, fast, vicious. Gideon lunged, his jaws clamping onto Silas's injured hind leg. Silas howled, snapping back, but he was too slow. Gideon tore at him, fueled by the arrogance of the winning side. Tessa stood there, clutching her broken arm, freezing rain soaking her dress. She knew she should run. She should run into the woods and never look back. Silas had lied to her. He had let her fiancé die. He was a monster who viewed her as livestock. But as she watched, Gideon pinned Silas to the ground. The grey wolf went for the throat. Silas didn't fight back. He looked tired. He looked ready to die. He looked at her, even in wolf form. Those eyes were human. They weren't commanding her to run this time. They were apologizing. He let the human die. But he had saved her. Twice. He had taken a bullet for her. He had jumped onto a helicopter for her. No, she whispered. She looked around. The wreckage, the debris. Her eyes landed on a piece of the helicopter frame, a jagged, sharp strut of aluminum alloy. It wasn't silver, but it was sharp. She didn't run away. She ran toward them. "Get off him!" she screamed. Gideon's wolf head snapped toward her. He snarled, a sound that vibrated her bones. He released Silas's throat and turned his attention to the easier prey. He crouched, ready to spring. "Tessa, run!" Silas's voice echoed in her head. She didn't run. She stood her ground. As Gideon launched himself at her, jaws wide enough to crush her skull, she dropped to her knees and thrust the metal strut upward. It was a move she'd seen in a movie once. A desperate, 1-in-a-million shot. The metal caught Gideon in the soft spot under his jaw, avoiding the bone, driving deep. His momentum carried him over her, crashing into the mud behind her. He thrashed, yelping, pawing at the metal lodged in his throat. She scrambled back, panting. Gideon's wolf shuddered and went still. He shifted back into human form, the metal protruding from his neck. He was dead. Silence fell over the clearing. Tessa turned to Silas. He was lying on his side, his breathing shallow. He shifted. The black fur melted away, revealing the broken, battered man beneath. He was naked, covered in mud and blood, shivering violently. The silver poisoning was finally winning. The black veins had reached his neck. She crawled over to him, sat in the mud, and pulled his head into her lap. "Why?" He wheezed, blood bubbling past his lips. "Why save me? You know what I did." "Did you?" she asked, brushing the wet hair off his forehead. "Did you let him die?" Silas closed his eyes. "The rogue." "He hit the car. Your fiancé was dead on impact. Tessa, his neck was broken. I pulled you out. I smelled the blood. I wanted to take you then. But you were grieving. You were so broken. So I bought the land next to yours. I watched. I waited." He coughed, his body seizing. "I told myself it was for the blood, for the cure. But then, you pulled the spear out. You yelled at me. You treated me like a person, not a king. And I realized I didn't want the cure if it meant hurting you." He looked up at her, his vision fading. "Leave me. Tessa. The silver. It's to the heart. I'm done." She looked at the wounds. They were festering, the magic eating him alive. "You said my blood is the cure," she whispered. "It's also a curse," he rasped. "If you give it willingly, it binds us. Forever. You will never be normal again." Tessa looked at the dead man in the mud behind them. She looked at the dark woods. She looked at the man dying in her arms. Normal was gone. Normal died the night the wolf showed up on her porch. She spotted a piece of sharp glass from the helicopter windshield in the mud. She picked it up. "I never liked Normal anyway," she said. She sliced her palm, a deep, clean cut. The red blood welled up, mixing with the rain. She pressed her hand to Silas's lips. "Drink," she commanded. "That's an order. Alpha." The moment the first drop touched his tongue, the reaction was violent. Silas arched his back, a guttural gasp tearing from his throat. It wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. Tessa didn't just feel him drink, she felt him. A jolt of electricity, like grabbing a live wire, slammed into her soul. The world around them, the wreckage, the storm, the dead body of Gideon vanished. In its place was a kaleidoscope of memories that weren't hers. She felt the thrill of running on 4 legs through dense pine forests, the copper taste of a fresh kill, the crushing weight of a crown he never asked for. But mostly, she felt his loneliness, a deep, hollow ache that had been there for years, only soothed when he watched a woman with sad eyes drinking tea on her porch. Mine, his voice echoed. It wasn't spoken. It vibrated directly inside her skull, loud and possessive. Yours, she replied, the thought slipping out before she could check it. Silas's eyes snapped open. The gold was gone. In its place was a violet fire neon, radioactive and terrifyingly beautiful. It was the color of the spear that had almost killed him. Now repurposed into the power of their bond, the transformation was terrifying to watch. The black veins of the necrotic magic didn't just fade, they were incinerated. His skin knit together with audible snaps and pops, muscles reinflating, the grey pallor replaced by a flush of aggressive vitality. He sat up, the mud sluicing off his broad shoulders, looking less like a man and more like a god of war reborn. He looked at her, his chest heaving, rain dripping from his nose. He didn't say a word. He just reached out, grabbing the back of her neck with a hand that was scorching hot. He pulled her into him, burying his face in the crook of her shoulder, inhaling her like she was oxygen. He didn't bite her. He just held her, shaking as the tether between them solidified into something unbreakable. You saved me, he rasped against her skin, his voice thick with emotion. I saved us, she corrected, wrapping her good arm around his trembling frame. 6 months later, the cabin was rebuilt now. It sat on the exact same footprint as the old one. But that's where the similarities ended. The walls were reinforced steel disguised as timber. The windows were bulletproof glass. The stray dog Tessa used to buy kibble for was actually a rotation of 6 elite enforcers who patrolled the perimeter of the property. Invisible to the naked eye, but very much present. She wasn't a nurse anymore. At least, not for humans. Her patients now tended to growl when she gave them shots and healed faster than she could bandage them. Tessa sat on the back porch, watching the morning mist clear off the mountains. The air was crisp, smelling of pine and damp earth, the smell of home. The back door opened, and Silas walked out. He was wearing worn-out jeans and a flannel shirt, holding 2 mugs of coffee. To anyone passing by, he looked like a rugged lumberjack. But Tessa knew what lay beneath the flannel. She knew the monster that slept in his chest, and he knew the woman who woke it up. He sat beside her, the wood creaking under his weight. He handed her a mug, his fingers brushing hers. Even now, 6 months later, that static shock was there, a constant reminder. The council sent another courier, he said quietly, staring out at the tree line. They are demanding a formal introduction. They want to see the Queen. She took a sip of dark roast. They can wait. The tomatoes need staking. And I haven't finished my book. Silas chuckled, a low rumble that she felt in her own chest. He leaned over, kissing her temple. As you wish. My queen. They still argued about the laundry. He still tried to be overprotective, and she still threatened to stab him with silverware if he growled at the mailman. But they were alive. She looked down at the thin, silver scar running across her palm, the mark of the silver blood. She had saved a monster, and he turned into a king. But more importantly, Tessa had saved herself. She stopped running from the grief that had defined her since the house accident. She stopped hiding in the woods, terrified of the world. Sometimes, she realized, you have to pull the spear out. Sometimes, you have to invite the danger into your living room, because sometimes, the thing that scares you the most is the only thing that can make you whole again. And that is how I became the queen of the werewolves. I know it sounds insane. I know half of you think this is a creative writing exercise, but do me a favor. If you're ever hiking in the Pacific Northwest, near Oak Haven, and you see a black wolf with violet eyes watching you from the tree line, don't run. Just bow your head and keep walking. He's just checking to make sure you aren't a threat to his wife. I'm sharing this because I can't keep it a secret anymore. And honestly, the internet is the only place people believe the unbelievable. If you enjoyed this story, please smash that like button. It really helps the algorithm find more people like us. Subscribe if you want to hear about the time I had to mediate a dispute between a vampire coven and the local HOA yes. That happened. And share this video with a friend who loves a good monster romance. Until next time, stay out of the woods at night.